In the year 1600, the annual revenue of Emperor Akbar's treasury was estimated at 17.5 million pounds. That same year, the entire treasury of Great Britain, one of Europe's rising powers, held roughly 16 million pounds. 2 centuries later, in 1800, Britain's total treasury had grown to that same level. Meanwhile, the Mughal Empire's annual revenue under Aurangzeb had reached over 100 million pounds. Hello, and a long awaited welcome back to another podcast from History Buff Studios. I'm your host, Rayyan Hassan, and this is Trade and Thrones. This podcast will be a spin off of our past podcasts and will dive into the unique trade networks and economies that powered many of the empires we know today. Today, we will learn about the Mughal Empire, an empire that at its height was not only one of the largest in the world, but also one of the richest. While many know the Mughals for the Taj Mahal, their military conquests, or renowned emperors like Akbar and Aurangzeb, few stop to ask a simple question: where did all of that wealth come from? Before we get into the actual mechanics and trade routes, we need to understand just how big the Mughal Empire was. At the peak of its powers, the land of the empire covered most of the whole Indian subcontinent and governed a population of around 100 to 150 million people, according to many historians, larger than modern Europe. By the end of 1700, the empire surpassed China as the largest economy in the world. Estimates put Mughal India with a GDP of 24.4%, and by 1750, the empire accounted for a whole quarter of the world's industrial output. Keep in mind that Europe was still a whole generation away from the Industrial Revolution that, as we know, would eventually shift the balances of global production. In these late 16th to early 17th centuries, although they were pre-industrial, India was assuredly not economically backwards. In fact, historians describe them as proto-industrial, operating many sophisticated manufacturing networks in textiles, metallurgy, shipbuilding, and processed goods at such a scale and complexity that foreshadowed what Europe would later develop, all before mechanized industrialization would ever take place. So how? What were the actual systems that helped power this wealth? Let's get right into it. The Mughal economy at its base was an agrarian economy. The primary economic sector, agriculture, had contributed around 52% of the total economic output in the late 16th century for the empire, which was not unusual for a pre-modern state. The only thing which was unusual was the Mughal sophistication in how they extracted and managed their agricultural revenue. Their key innovation was the use of the Dasala system, which was implemented by Akbar and his finance minister Raja Todar Mal between 3 years, 1579 to 1582. The state conducted land surveys across the empire, classifying and measuring agricultural land into different categories based on the cultivation patterns as well as fertility. The prices and yields of the crops were then tracked over 10-year averages, helping to create a smooth baseline for their revenue that helped shield the state and the average civilian from the uncertainty of a single bad harvest year. Taxes were converted into a cash amount based on average prices instead of being paid with crops or other goods. This was a big departure from the previous tribute-based systems it replaced. When the state needed the tax payments only in silver rupees rather than previous goods, like sacks of grain, artisans and peasants had to go participate and sell their goods on money markets first. The shift to cash taxes drew farmers into markets. To pay their taxes, they had to sell their crops and trade with merchants, accelerating the monetization of the Indian economy and fueling more manufacturing and commerce. The Mughal state also invested in agriculture. Irrigation projects expanded cultivable land, while the tax exemptions encouraged farmers to bring unused land into production. Rather than simply extracting more revenue, these policies increased agricultural output and broadened the tax base. commercial farming was actively promoted. High-value cash crops such as cotton, indigo, sugar, and opium were encouraged through the tax system, while the adoption of maize and tobacco from the Americas further boosted both food production and market activity. These were deliberate policies, not accidental developments. Nowhere was their success more evident than in Bengal Suba, the empire's wealthiest province. Producing roughly 12% of the Mughal Empire's GDP, Bengal became one of the world's most productive early modern economies, renowned for its textiles, silk, and agricultural exports. Wow, now you know how important agriculture was and how the Mughals got the revenue machine going in new revolutionary ways. What else now? When most people think of Mughal economic output, they think of lots of textiles. While this is true, Indian cotton and silk were among one of the most sought-after goods in our early modern global economy. The textile industry was only one part of a much bigger manufacturing structure in the Mughal Empire. The state operated imperial workshops known as karkhanas, which produced luxury goods for the Mughal court, such as fine textiles and jewelry, all the way to weapons, books, and decorative objects. These workshops employed up to thousands of many skilled artisans. Manufacturing, however, was not just limited to imperial production. The empire sustained vast amounts of networks for private artisanal production, particularly specializing in textiles, which operated across villages, towns, and cities. Indian textiles, like the muslin of Bengal, the cotton print of Gujarat, and the silk of various regions, were not just simply mass-produced fabrics. They represented the technical achievements that come with out-of-this-world refinement. The finest muslin from Dhaka was so light it was sometimes called and known as woven air. These were the premium goods dictating the premium prices in markets from the Persian Gulf to Southeast Asia and then to Europe. The demand for Indian fabrics was one of the primary reasons that European ships were pulled towards the Indian Ocean in the first place. More on that later. Beyond textiles, the empire also had a significant metallurgical sector. For example, shipbuilding, particularly in Bengal, operated at such a scale that many modern historians find purely remarkable. Economic historian Indrajit Ray estimated that Bengal's shipbuilding output during the 16th and 17th centuries ran at around 223,250 tons annually, compared to only a combined output of roughly 23,000 tons from the 19 British colonies in North America, as late as 1769 to 1771. The many sophisticated ship designs made in Bengal influenced European naval architecture. India was not just receiving the nautical tech from the West. In many ways, that exchange was quite the contrary. Mughal India was also a major producer of strategic and luxury goods. Bihar supplied much of the world's saltpeter for gunpowder, while the Golconda mines yielded legendary diamonds, including the future Koh-i-Noor. Steel, sugar, cotton textiles, and indigo were also produced on a vast scale. Far from a simple commodity economy, the empire supported a diverse manufacturing base that supplied both everyday goods and luxury products for domestic and international markets. Wow, we just truly now know what powered the strong Mughal Empire. Metallurgy, agriculture, textiles, shipbuilding, and so much more. Let's actually explore more on why Europe decided to come, although all of this should actually be proof why. European powers did not arrive in the Indian Ocean in the late 15th and 16th centuries because they were stronger than the existing powers in the region. They arrived because of all the extraordinary wealth that flowed through the Mughal Empire and then through the broader Indian Ocean trading network, which was so immense that access to it was worth enormous investment in conflict, ships, and men. The Mughal Empire sat smack dab at the center of a trading world which connected Persia in Central Asia to the northwest, the Arabian Peninsula in East Africa to their west, Southeast Asia and China to their east, and increasingly through the Indian Ocean, Europe, and the Americas. Major port cities such as Surat and Gujarat were among the busiest commercial hubs in the world during the 17th century. Dhaka in Bengal, with a population that many accounts have put above 1 million, functioned as an extraordinary financial capital of commercial density. This trade balance tells a very revealing story. Mughal India maintained a structural trade surplus. The empire exported massive amounts of manufactured goods, such as textiles, processed agricultural products, steel, saltpeter, and received payments mostly in silver and gold bullion. European countries like the Netherlands and England shipped significant quantities of precious metals to India to pay for their Indian goods because they did not have that much that Indian markets wanted to buy in return. This is a critical point. The global silver flows of the early modern era ran substantially towards India, not away from it. By the late 17th and early 18th centuries, Mughal India dominated European trade with Asia. Around 95% of Britain's Asian imports came from the empire, while Bengal Suba alone supplied roughly 40% of Dutch imports from the region. These were not minor trading relationships. European companies such as the East India Company and the Dutch VOC were, in effect, commercial agents that transported Mughal goods to European markets. At this stage, they depended far more on Mughal India than Mughal India had ever depended on them. The Mughals supported this commercial strength through major investments in infrastructure. They developed an extensive road network linking cities, markets, and trading centers across the subcontinent, with dedicated officials responsible for its construction and maintenance. The empire also operated the Dak Chowki postal system, which allowed faster communication across its vast territories and helped merchants coordinate trade more efficiently. Wow, the powers in trading of the modern day are vastly contrasted from the powers in the early modern period. The Mughal Empire really was hustling. Thank you for listening, and that's all for part 1 on the wealth of the Mughal Empire episode. Tune into the next part of episode 1 of Trade and Thrones, and this is your host, Rayyan Hassan.